Hello and welcome to the Fungi Kingdom. In today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about the beginnings of what the Fungi Kingdom is, what are some characteristics of fungi, and why are they different from plants. We're going to continue this in tomorrow's class, but this is going to give you a good start into this particular kingdom and some of the information that we need to understand where these organisms come from and why they have their own kingdom. So first of all, we have mycology. Mycology is the study of fungi. Please keep in mind that fungi is the plural and fungus is singular. So a lot of times you will hear people talking about fungus as plural, but they're actually not saying it correctly. There are four main characteristics of fungi. Sorry, forgot to mention this at the beginning. Please make sure that you are taking notes on this PowerPoint and that you hang on to those notes for tomorrow, because you will need them and be able to use them on the exam for this unit. So, as I said, there are four main characteristics of fungi. First of all, they are eukaryotic. When I say that fungi are eukaryotic, I'm talking about what type of cell they are. A eukaryote is an organism that has eukaryotic cells, and this means that their cells have nuclei and mitochondria. Mitochondria are basically the energy sources of the cell. That's where the chemicals go through reactions and cells produce their energy. They are also heterotrophs. The prefix to this word, hetero, is important because what it means is that they depend on other organisms for food, and hetero means different, so they depend on different organisms for food. The third is that they are multicellular. And finally, the fourth is that they cannot move on their own. I hope they can't, because I don't really think I want to see a mushroom walking down the street or any other type of fungi walking down the street. So these main characteristics of fungi are important to keep in mind, because sometimes you're going to be asked about an organism based on its characteristics, and you're going to have to tell what it is. So these are the four main characteristics. Now, one of the biggest questions that I always get asked is, why are fungi different from plants? Well, here are four reasons. Number one, they lack chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the pigment that turns plants green. Number two is that fungi are not photosynthetic, meaning they cannot undergo photosynthesis. So they cannot produce their own food. Most are actually what we call saprophytes. Some are parasites, however. A saprophyte is an organism that feeds on dead or decaying organisms. So while most fungi are basically what we used to call decomposers, they are saprophytes. Some are parasites, so they don't wait till the organism that they're on is dead. They actually grow and live on live organisms and eat it along the way. They also never reproduce by seeds. If you think about plants, they always have a seed of some sort that you can plant and you can grow in a garden, but fungi do not. And most fungi have cell walls made of chitin, which looks like that. Not very pretty, but it's reddish and it's a bit harder and rubbery. Whereas, do you know what plant cells are made of? Some of you may not, but plant cells are made of cellulose, which is basically a fat. So we now have four main characteristics of the fungi kingdom and four reasons why fungi are different from plants. So let's keep these in mind. So what are the parts of a fungi? If we know that they're basically mushrooms, what else are there? Well, we have hyphae. Hyphae is a network of thin thread-like structures that form the body of a fungus. So, for example, in this picture, we look at the bottom part here of the picture that's pointed to in red, and we can see all of this white. We would typically think about these as being roots, but they're not. This is the body of the fungus, called the hyphae. This is a close-up. This is through a microscope, and you can see how intricate and woven through these are, and really how thin and complicated they are. Hypha is singular, hyphae is plural. Hyphae contains cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is the part of the cell, remember, that's the gel type part. It gives it its volume. And hyphae grow and branch until they cover and digest the food source upon which the fungi is growing. So in this picture on the left here, this fungi is growing on some dead organism in the dirt, and all of this is going to keep growing and growing and growing until it's digested all of the organism that's there. Now, continuing on, we have the mycelium. The mycelium is what we call a mass of hyphae. So mycelia is plural, mycelium is singular. So once we have hyphae formed and we look at a group of hyphae together, we call it mycelia or mycelium. And here's a picture of it. The mycelium is usually hidden in the soil, in the wood, in any other food source that the fungi is eating. So we don't normally see this. Here on the right is a picture of mycelium that grew on a sunflower, and you can see the white and how large it is there. Mycelium may be small enough to feed a single ant, or it may cover many, many acres underground. In fact, I remember reading one time somewhere in France they found a mycelium that covered something like 5 acres, and they kept trying to find the end of it, and it took them quite a while to find the end of this. So depending on how much food there is for the fungi to, or the fungus to eat, determines how big the mycelium is going to get. So how does this work? Well, what we start with is this germ tube. The germ tube is a growing spore, and if we look here, we have a growing spore that in a diagram. So the top picture is what it really looks like. This side picture is a schematic or a sketch to show you in a little bit less complicated way. We start with a single hypha with the initial hypha. This is the very first part of the fungi that grows. You'll then see that as it goes, the hypha branches off and gets more complicated and more branches and continues to grow until it covers all of the food source. So now we have a mass of hyphae, which we also can call a mycelium. And it's not a mycelium until it gets to being something as complicated as that. Before that, here, it would be just a hyphae. Technicalities, but biology is very specific on its wording. So what are we looking at when we see a fungus among us? Well, really, we're looking at mushrooms, if we think about it that way, and let's talk about mushrooms in particular. The part of the fungus that we see is only the fruit of the organism. So the mushroom is a fruit, just like you eat an apple off a tree, we eat a mushroom off of a fungus. The mycelium is underneath the soil, and that's why if you break off a mushroom that you see growing in your yard, please don't eat them, but if you break one off that's growing in your yard, it will grow back again because that's just the fruit of it. It's not the whole plant. The living body, shall we call it, of the fungus is a mycelium, and that's the underground. So if you really want to get rid of those mushrooms that grow in your grass, then you actually have to dig up the entire mycelium. If you live in an area that has a lot of moisture, which I don't happen to at the moment, but I have, then you will get mycelium to be very, very, very large. And you may have patches of mushrooms that grow around in a grass or in a field, and they could all be connected to the same mycelium because there's lots of good food for them to eat underneath that's decaying bugs and organisms and leaves and things like that. So, 4 main types of fungi. We're only going to get through 2 of them today. We'll talk about 2 more of them in tomorrow's class. First is a zygote fungi, which we often refer to as mold. Zygote fungi reproduces by spores in the sporangia. Sporangia is the name for the part of the fungi that produces the spores. Now, spores are tiny, tiny, tiny little seed type things. They're not seeds, And when they grow, they then float around in the air, and then they can burst. And when they burst, it's like getting sprayed with dust of all of the tiny little baby fungi. A sporangia, like I said, are structures found on the tips of the hyphae that make spores. They're on the tips so that when the spore is made and is ready to be released, it can be shot out of the sporangia, sort of like water shooting out of a cannon, or a t-shirt cannon when you shoot t-shirts out at ball games and stuff. It's just like that. And then when it gets out, the spore explodes, and then all of the baby fungi can spread around. An example is bread mold. So these pieces of bread have obviously been attacked and been by fungi and a zygote type fungi, and the mold's been growing on them quite a bit. With bread mold, it produces spores and sporangia that stick up above the bread. So if you ever have bread mold grow, which I'm sure you've all had at some point in time, have mold on your bread or seen mold on the bread, it grows sort of like a fuzzy hair up and above the bread itself. The sporangia starts its growth inside the bread and then just grows taller and gets higher than the bread itself. If we look at this bread, you'll notice that it has a different kind of mold. It has rhizoids. For rhizoids, the hyphae of bread mold, rhizoids are the hyphae of bread mold that digest bread for ingestion. So they are a little bit different, but they digest the bread itself. And this is what they look like. This is what you're seeing, what all that white stuff is that you're seeing, and this is what it looks like up close. And all of these little golden things here on the top are the spores that when they're ready can be shot out and be like dust. So that is the end of our talk for today about the fungi kingdom. Tomorrow, like I said, we'll finish talking about some more types of fungi and where we see them and what they can do, and I'll answer any questions, and we'll find out what we're going to do with this mold and fungus for this unit. So keep your notes, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.